So, Ronnie, it's been quite a last 18 months with COVID and everything there. What do you see the key challenges for manufacturing and engineering sectors over the next 18 months?
So, Paul, from a Volution perspective, we have revenue both in the UK and, of course, pan-European and Australasia. But I think what I'll do is I'll answer this question from a sort of very much UK perspective. And in the UK, our sort of leading ventilation brand is Ventaxia. So if I make it a more sort of Ventaxia specific challenge and opportunity, I mean, I think the one that clearly we've been wrestling with for some considerable time is around supply chain. We're a provider of ventilation solutions, as our strapline says here at the back of the room, healthy air sustainably. And it's been really difficult. If I look at, I've got over 30 years in manufacturing, and I think it's fair to say that there hasn't been, in my experience, a more difficult period from a supply chain perspective. So what we've got to expect is that the crisis isn't over. Sadly, COVID-19 is still with us, although thankfully the vaccine rollout seems to be winning the battle over time, and long may that continue. But supply chain challenges and indeed inflation are going to be the order of play for some considerable time. And I don't have a crystal ball, so I can't be certain as to, is there an end to that, when there'll be an end to that. So I think what we've got to be aware of is the supply chain will be very difficult. Inflation is likely to continue. So those are the challenges, but how would I look to mitigate those challenges? What sort of advice could I give, or indeed, what's the approach that we're taking internally? I think from a supply chain perspective, our approach has been that to help our suppliers as much as possible, to give them as much notice as to what we think we'll need. So we're trying to forecast on a longer term basis. We're trying to look a lot further down the track as to what our demand might look like, and to give as much notice to our suppliers as possible to help them to plan. I think that's worked really well. Another area, and of course it's not as easy as it sounds, because there is a working capital or cash perspective, but we're definitely holding more inventory. We've decided as a business to hold more inventory to try and soften the impact or the blow of unreliable supply chain or manufacturing input. And then on top of that, the one that I would sort of heed caution with is the inflation aspect. And of course, the nature of our industry is that quite often we give pricing out for the long term, for projects or whatever else. And I think people have just got to be very careful about the way they approach the market, because I don't know anybody who could give sort of fixed prices for the long term with that level of uncertainty. So I think you've got to be very careful about your T's and C's and be very transparent about the risks. Here's a quotation today, it's only valid for a reasonably short period of time, and of course it's up for review. We don't want people to be misled by this challenge. And none of the things I've said there are new things. The Bank of England is very clear on inflation. There's a lot of talk about it being transitory. I'm not so sure that it's transitory, and time will tell. So that I think from a supply chain and input cost perspective will be the biggest challenge. I think one that's existed for some time, and I know you're very passionate about this, is the sort of skills gap.
Yeah.
And as a manufacturer, we know that recruiting, hiring the skills that we need is increasingly difficult. And so in that regard, we work very hard, whether it be our injection molding facility in Reading, to try and equip or train our own people to have better skills. So I see input materials, price risk on inflation, and of course retaining and hiring high quality individuals to get behind what we do. I think they're all manageable. They're not easy, and it's definitely been a very, very difficult last 12 months. But look, I think let's be optimistic about things. Demand in our sectors, across construction, for refurbishment, and indeed with the sort of low carbon agenda, the low carbon backdrop, which is going to drive, I believe, sort of innovation and high-end, high-quality ventilation solutions for many years into the future. are underpinning our space. So look, the good news is, and the reason I think that we've had these challenges is demand has been very, very strong. And so I think the outlook for the economy at the moment, certainly in manufacturing, is probably more positive, certainly than it would have been, during that difficult period of COVID, April, May, June, July last year. And long may that continue. We've been in manufacturing a long time, and it's nice to actually have that sort of optimism that, in my view, could go on for some considerable time now.
Thanks, Ronnie. That's some great advice with quite a bit of optimism in there as well.